And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen, standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter in the way they matter at the time they matter. That time is today, Monday the 16th. Here at Sierra Podcast, your host, Daniel Horowitz, back here today. I know government is off because of this nebulous President's Day. But of course, here we don't celebrate the generic presidents. This is not about Chester Arthur or Barack Obama or Joe Biden. It's about one president, George Washington. And what we need to be thinking about is how do we re-inspire and recreate that spirit of independence, especially as we think about the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, what George Washington stood for. How do we recreate that now? Now, a couple things there. First of all, you're not going to recreate it by waiting for another George Washington, meaning one person coming along. Because frankly, even back then, it wasn't just about that one man. Not by a long shot, no matter how great he was. We actually had a movement of people that recognized that what was going on wasn't tenable, that we needed change. We needed to break out from this current morass. And that's where we are now. We need a recognition that what we're doing with the Uniparty and the party system is not working, that George Washington was actually correct in his warning in the farewell address, that what ultimately sowed the dissolution, what he predicted would sow the dissolution in the Union, was factions, political parties. And then once we did that, that became even worse because then we started to have a Uniparty where once you don't have individuals that are independent and three branches of federal and then state governments checking each other, instead factions of two parties, well then at an elite level, they actually merged and then they just compete for the other half of the country that the other party already took over. But at the implementation level, the same stuff marches on. So I want to get back to the foundation today of what George Washington warned about to celebrate today. It's not Washington's birthday, but really that's what we should be celebrating. It's, I guess, 6 more days from now. And obviously, as always, we'll talk about some of the news of the day, that basically the street mob is winning on immigration. Immigration was supposed to be our best thing, our best issue. The economy just goes downhill from there. That's even worse. Yet, even as it relates to immigration, the promises of mass deportations are being ground to a halt. Democrats are crushing it politically. And what are we left with other than, how many seats are we going to win in the next election? Who's we? We don't have representation. One of the problems that too many of my colleagues suffer is that because they don't have a readily available solution. Okay, we don't have another faction or movement on the ballot to vote for. So therefore, we have to lie to ourselves and then lie to our audience that somehow the status quo is tenable. Well, the GOP is not perfect, Trump's not perfect, but Trump all the way, GOP all the way. No, we need to break out of that mold. And again, when I say break out of that mold, it doesn't mean, so then who's the next person? Rubio, JD, or even Ron DeSantis, who's much better than them. But still, it's not about one person. We're not going to have a George Washington. And even back then, it wasn't just about him. You need to build a parallel movement, and that happens from bottom up. That's multifaceted. It's not going to work for the whole country because we already lost the country. It's going to have to be certain areas creating these ordered liberty cells. And that's what we're going to have to build off of. Matter of issues. We have the raw materials with some Freedom Caucuses. We talked about this on Friday's show with the chairman of the West Virginia Freedom Caucus. That's where we need to think. But if we're going to continue like a hamster on the spinning wheel, the next election, the next piece of crap that the GOP machine just churns out for us to support, we're going to degenerate for the rest of our lives. And frankly, I have no plans on doing this for the rest of my life. It's just stupid. At some point, we need to recapture that spirit of 1776, that spirit of George Washington, and understand what he stood for, not look for some sort of king or some sort of charismatic leader that's going to save us. It's never going to happen. But to understand the principles that he led with. And obviously, I really think, you look at the Constitution, there's a lot of debates now on the right, people that roughly agree with what you and I believe in. Did the Constitution fail? Well, I mean, it did clearly on some level, but was it flawed? Were the anti-federalists right? Now, the bottom line is there is no system of government that you can construct that is going to last forever for a complacent people. That if you just seed the playing field, obviously it's, there's no amounts of checks and balances you can put in place. You need a certain amount of government to do a certain amount of functions and not do the other functions, not get corrupt, not get taken over. But it requires eternal vigilance. And, like for example, we talk a lot about, we'll get into a little bit today, judicial supremacism. How do we have it that the branch of government that was supposed to be the least dangerous has now completely taken over everything, has more power than the other branches combined, yet it doesn't stand for re-elections, life tenured at the federal level with the federal judiciary? What do we do with that? Well, was that in the Constitution? No, it wasn't. But I'll tell you how that happened. The original design was that we would have branches of government that would be jealous of each other and guard their powers jealously against the other. But what we had instead, what wound up happening was the rise of political parties. So rather than having, the judiciary here, the legislative branch here, the executive branch there, it was just a redundant manifestation of the political parties. So the reason we don't have impeachment anymore is because it's not, the legislative branch is ticked off at the executive. It's that you have Republicans and Democrats. So your party will roughly always support you in the other branch. But then nowadays we have a second layer of that built upon it, which is that when it actually matters, both parties are really the same. So, but they monopolize the access to the ballot and the functionality of the other three branches. So we're completely shut out and disenfranchised now. But this is what Washington warned about in his farewell address. What I believe was his most dire, consequential, important premonition. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. And I'm just going to paraphrase here, just skip to other things he said. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. Boy, folks, how does that sound familiar? And this is the general problem. It's not that we can't get in a room and Constitutional Convention style, 250th anniversary of our founding, and conjure up a plan as to pray together, strategize together, do something different. Work with the state freedom caucuses, work with the red states, work to get on the playing field, reorient and retool all these conservative organizations that are worthless and baneful into something useful. And then once we do that, that would open up so many more doors. You can't even imagine the sorts of things we would do. Frankly, it's a lot easier than you even think it is to start a new movement and eventually a new party. But that's kind of George Washington's warning. When it all becomes about the party, which usually then ultimately becomes about one man, then you don't allow your brains to have that conversation to have that meeting. As you well know, those of you who have been with me for a while, I've been calling for this for roughly 15 years. I said, look, what we're doing is not working. We don't have political representation. Let's get the top voices in a room and just get together. And with the recognition that what we're doing is not working. I will put my ideas up against anyone else's ideas in this industry. I have proffered more ideas on a greater array of issues and political strategies than anyone around this generation, and I have no problem bragging about that and saying that. And then at the same time, I'll look you in the eye and say it's not good enough. It's still underwhelming. But if we had other people get in a room together, there's a lot we can do. The problem is I can't find enough people with voice and influence that even want to have that meeting, that even want to break out of the current paradigm. It's always metatom, and then obviously very soon that's going to end, inevitably. So then they'll just move on to metavance. And I'm not saying I want someone other than him, although I don't trust him. It's that it's not about that. You can't even think about being independent and having an independent view on what immigration should look like, what our tech investments and data centers and AI should look like, what red states should look like, where politics intersects with culture, what that should look like, fiscally, what that should look like. No one even cares to think about that. We're not even debating policy issues anymore. They're comatose because, as George Washington warned, it's all about men seeking what? Security and repose in the absolute power of one individual. So for the last 10 years, everyone on the right has been just into that. In many ways, it's worse than the left because the left, at least, is thinking of ideas. 99% of the time, they're terrible ideas and they're harmful. But once in a while, you can find some allies on things like data centers because they're not confined to this intellectual ghetto of one person. Say what you want about the Democrats, but since Obama, which was a long time ago, they've never had one central figure, and that's sort of why they're more successful. I'm not just saying I don't like Trump or Vance or this person as the central figure. I want another person as the central figure. No, I think we need to rethink our entire approach of everything is GOP, general elections, or even primaries, but certainly general elections, and particularly the next presidential election. What is it we're going to do? And there are no readily available good answers to that. I have nascent ideas. But what I'm telling you is the problem is we don't even have a group of people with influence that want to broach that and believe there's something wrong. And this is why we don't have, one branch of government fighting the other, because we have political parties that have now merged and created a monopoly at the elite level. So they've taken over everything. So we're left with nothing. And then the few areas that we should have control, like the deepest of red states, and where we actually were building Freedom Caucus or building movements, now we've consolidated that power into the hands of just one man. And he's endorsed against our candidates. And even before I get to all the liberal things that Trump does, the narcissistic things, the bad endorsements, the liberal endorsements where he empowers the swamp rather than drains it. But just the fact that we put all of our security and repose and have been doing so for the last 10 years, that in itself is the problem. And this was the fulfillment of the worst premonition of George Washington. So anyway, I want to move on to immigration and the courts and how the left is winning spectacularly on what was our most popular issue. And that alone should prompt a cathartic moment on the right to realize, whoa, we need a major course correction. Democrats are going to take over the next two elections likely. This is our high watermark and it's pretty low. What are we going to do about it the next number of months? But also in the long run. But let me give you an example of, this is more economic, but the same thing applies to immigration, why we can't even have this discussion. Larry Kudlow, he was speaking on Fox Business, his show there, about the gaslighting about the economy and why he is okay being lied to about the economy. Take a listen here to clip one.
Trump has made the Republicans the optimistic party. He is optimistic. He may embellish his numbers from time to time, but I think people love an optimist. He wants to make America great again. He says we're the hottest economy in the world. He says he's got over $18 trillion in foreign investment. I don't care if the numbers aren't precisely right. The optimism is precise.
Okay, folks, that quote is gold. He's like, look, he just wants to make America great again. I mean, he says it's the hottest economy. He says, and he like stumbles over the word, starts laughing. There's $18 trillion in investment. So I don't care if he's lying to me. It's not true. I just love the optimism. I mean, I don't even know what we're supposed to do with that. Like, really. That's the exact opposite of what we need. That is why we've never come to a solution since the Tea Party, because of the Fox News gaslighting. And, I never watch it, but those of you, if you turn it on for a minute, I watch it when I'm in a hotel room or something, and you could see why they sell political fentanyl to our base, where we want people to have disquiet. We want them not black-pilled, but red-pilled, that what we're doing is not good enough. We need to come up with new strategies, a new movement, new ideas. And instead, it's like, stop, it's all good. And even if you're being lied to, even if the economy sucks, but just the fact that we're optimistic that it doesn't suck is amazing. So just keep watching Fox News, keep voting Republican, and everything will be great. No, I'm sorry. That's not good enough. That's disgusting. And that is emblematic of what we're up against. And look, the economy, that's terrible. But we all thought that immigration was the one thing. I mean, you never had a bigger mandate. We're going to get the job done. And instead, what we are finding is that the left is fighting in the streets. They're fighting in the courts, and they're now fighting in the schools. And our side does nothing but fight in the algorithms online. And that's why the other side's winning, even on immigration, which was an 80-20 issue for us. We could still win on it, but not if we don't recognize that we need to do something spectacularly different than what we're doing today. So you have all over the place now. The mob is just, violent Mexican nationalist students skip school in LA. Doesn't even look like America. They launched an attack on federal agents at the Metropolitan Detention Center. They had a riot, so now they're letting out schools to do it. You had in Baltimore a bunch of anarchists took over a highway, and none of them, I'm telling you, there's no arrests. None of them are getting the J6 treatment. You have acting ICE Director Todd Lyons told Congress recently that local Colorado law enforcement leaked details of a impending ICE raid, and that allowed gang members to flee before they arrived. Well, if that's true, that is a straight up violation of 8 USC 1324, harboring, concealing, shielding from detection illegal aliens. How come we're not seeing massive prosecutions? We're not. If anything, the opposite is true. It's the Trump administration losing in the courts. That's what's so pathetic here. What we're doing is not working. We know already from last week, Trump did two things. He pulled out the ICE enforcement from Minnesota, so they won straight up. And then he pulled out the National Guard because of the courts from everywhere. Right? Look it up. All the National Guard was sent home. This is George W. Bush's big banner on the ship. Mission accomplished. Thousands of lives expended after that. I don't understand what we're doing here. I really don't. But the worst thing you can do is mission accomplished. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't know. Trump's up against a lot of adversity. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm just saying at least make excuses for why the mission is not accomplished so we could strive towards accomplishing it. But if you just gaslight us and say, well, Republicans are great, Mr. Trump is great, well, then what are we doing? We're setting everyone up for failure. William Kelly, a terrorist who stormed the church in Minnesota, he stormed out of court over the weekend and demanded more leftist terrorized federal agents. It was amazing. You're like, gets out of there, scot-free. I'm telling you, we're at the point where ICE agents will be prosecuted before any of these anarchists and terrorists and Antifa guys are, that are literally violating multiple statutes. I'm sure many of you saw the video, the woman setting fire to a warehouse in at an ICE detention center in Kansas City. Yeah, I'd love to see what happens to her relative to the pre-detention holding and beatings of the January 6th prisoners. So, there's that. And then you'd think like, okay, they would be on the hook for prosecution. No, it's the courts are persecuting the Trump administration, but only in as much as they're willing to be persecuted. Another judge blocked the Trump administration from allowing ICE in churches. This was a George W. Bush appointee from Massachusetts, Judge Dennis Saylor, saying that you can't enter churches. I mean, it literally violates law. There's no exception for that. There's no exception that if a criminal runs into a church, you can't do an enforcement operation there. That's a political question, a social question, whether you want to do that. That's not a legal question. A judge can't do that, but they're listening. An Obama-appointed judge ordered the Trump administration to facilitate returns of hundreds of already deported people. So what, they're going to go and grab them and bring them back? Again, a judge can issue judgment. He can't say, like, fire up the engines and, gas up the planes and bring them back. He doesn't have that power. But they're going to listen. So what's the point? Why even have elections then, if this is what we're going to do? But again, do you know what they waste their political capital on? I'm sorry, but it's true. I don't know if you guys saw the story. The Wall Street Journal had a whole story that Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski have been using luxury 737 MAX jets with a private cabin in the back for their travel around the country. She's married. And that $70 million plane was supposed to be earmarked. It actually is earmarked in documents for deportations. And instead, it's being used for God knows what they're doing on it. I know that's a side story, but in many respects, it's emblematic of the vanity of this administration. That they'll sell the public that, oh, we're going to stand up for the forgotten American. And then literally, it's Marie Antoinette. It's the Golden Ballroom. Okay? It's all the pay for play with the big tech bros and the crypto bros and the Arab bros and the Chinese bros, by the way, too. We'll talk about that later this week. The Chinese espionage that's continuing with the foreign students and, college professors that are able to work on our sensitive programs from China, CCP members getting let in, continuing. And Trump says he wants to bring in more. You see what I'm saying? What we're doing is not working. If at the pinnacle of trifecta power on an election won over immigration, you're completely ground to a halt, and it's actually negative. Because not only are you doing it, but you're not doing deportations because, aside from incompetence, it's also because anarchy is now winning. And this sets the precedent going forward that they could veto the power through the courts illegally, but also through the street. So they're winning everywhere. They're winning everywhere. I don't know what you do here. And by the way, I just want to say, everything is a grift, even on the issues that we agree with. So what we need is judicial and immigration reform in a must-pass bill and the desire of the administration to stand behind the law, regardless of what a district judge says, because they're going to come back even if you pass a law. They did it with defunding Planned Parenthood and the BBB. So you're always going to have to stand up to it. And End all the lawfare. Make it that if you don't have a habeas petition that you're an American citizen, the decision of immigration officials is final. That's literally, I'm paraphrasing a court case from the 1890s. That was always the case. There's no lawfare. So then we don't need mass detention. We need no lawfare. So we grab you and then we have ships, not planes, but ships. So logistically, you don't need they're held on the ships and they go straight home because we don't have a desire to hold people. See, then you have more legal issues anyway. When you have indefinite detention, you're going to have more legal issues. Our goal is not to do that, it's to get them out. But they're building these massive facilities with people that have contracts that are connected to Trump donors. We don't need a detention industrial complex. We need to get these people out. And the way to get them out is ending the lawfare and having maritime removals, not ship removals. And then there's the third aspect to this is that if they actually wanted to cut off the magnets and end employment, it would end the issue because a lot of them couldn't live here. They could clamp down on identity theft. They could clamp down on the jobs. They don't want to do it because Trump himself has said he wants those working here to remain. He just wants to go after the criminal aliens. So if this is what we're going to get on our top issue before we even get into foreign policy, we get into the economy, and then the Democrats come back and then we're crushed and lose power even in red states, we're going to have a big problem on our hand because then the things that we could have been doing to build fortresses that I laid out 14 months ago when Trump won the election, that we chose to squander our capital and not do, and put all of our security and repos in the absolute power of one individual, as George Washington warned, then now we're not even going to have that ability in a lot of these states. If we lose Ohio, lose Georgia and Arizona, maybe Iowa, Alaska, and who knows what else. One other thing on immigration, actually two other things. The Department of Transportation. So now Sean Duffy, the DOT secretary, so he is bragging that they're cutting off illegals from driving trucks. But if you look carefully, like I said last week, they're only doing it prospectively, but there's thousands upon thousands that they're not invalidating. And like, this is such an easy issue to do at a federal level and a state level. It is so destructive. Republicans could even win an election on it. People are being cut down. We talked last week about that Amish family that was killed. I just want to play for you how horrific it is having these nuts on, getting truck licenses and driving on the wrong side of the road. For those of you who listen, you're not going to be able to hear much, but I'm just going to play 10 seconds here of our video for our video listeners on YouTube or viewers, how horrific a crash like that looks. So you're seeing here, the truck just crosses over into oncoming traffic and then just, high speed, obviously crashes head on into this pickup truck and killing 4 people. How is it that we can continue to go on without DOT 14 months into this invalidating all the CDLs? How come we don't have more states like Florida that are going after this? We only have like 1 or 2 states doing this. And again, no state is doing this yet, but every state needs a law that if an illegal alien is caught driving a truck at any point, whether something happened, a mishap or not, if you're caught in the state and we find you, 10 years in prison. Okay, these are the sorts of fortresses that we need to build. You understand, because of the backlash and the mishandling of immigration by Trump, when Democrats come back in, they're going to have a mandate not just to do communism, but also to bring in more illegals and grant them status. We're going to need a red state interposition against that, but we've destroyed that. We've destroyed it. One other thing on immigration that's just related. So technically right now you have a government shutdown. Not really, because Saturday, Sunday, and now Monday is a federal holiday. So it's not really much of anything yet. But you have a shutdown for DHS because Republicans stupidly basically let go of the hostages. So now Democrats could shoot at DHS. So what would you think should be our message? Our message should be around things like the endless Americans killed from illegal alien drunk driving and the sanctuary cities harboring them and the judges releasing gangbangers, like all these stories. You could talk all day long about this. And even how they're harming the American worker. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to have a shutdown fight, that's what you would have it over. These people want to shut down our law enforcement in order that they could bring in dangerous people, shaft the American worker. But no, instead, quintessential Republican to focus on the process of, this is so sad about TSA workers. Katie Britt, a rhino from hell, from Alabama, wasting a red state. So you know what the Democrats have from blue states, but frankly, wherever the Democrats win, even when they win in red states, they have radicals. This is what we have in the state of Alabama, courtesy of Trump's endorsement of her a couple of years ago, Katie Britt.
TSA agent is going to go without a paycheck. Why? So that you can posture politically. I'm over it. Everybody on that side of the aisle knows that ICE and CBP will continue to be funded. They're going to continue to enforce the law just as they should.
So this is her fight that, oh my gosh, the TSA agents aren't going to get paid, and I'm over it. Yeah, you're really over it. Okay, so what's your plan to pass with 51 votes? Talking filibuster, reconciliation, whatever you want, judicial reform, cutting off sanctuary cities. Nothing. Democrats laugh. In fact, Democrats don't even need the filibuster. They have the courts and they have the people out in the streets shutting it down, and Trump just walks away. The last on you. What a complete and utter joke. So this is my point. If we can't even win on sanctuary cities at the pinnacle of the GOP power and trifecta following an election largely won on that issue, and this is the high watermark of their power, and they walk away, pull out of Minneapolis, pull the National Guard out, won't do judicial reform, won't shove in immigration reforms through must-pass bills, then I don't even know what we're doing, because it's only going to get worse here on out. That's the simple reality. I want to move on to foreign policy. We haven't talked about foreign policy in a long, long time. And, this is obviously where Trump has expended the lion's share of his capital and his his energy, his time. And some people speculate, and rightfully so, that he feels stymied everywhere else. He feels that this is where the president can make his mark. Even though, again, he's stymied domestically because he refuses to expend his capital on must-pass bills on the issues that actually matter. He refuses to make the right primary choices, and that's why he's the way he is. But, okay, foreign policy, I'll bite. And I said in his first term that I liked his foreign policy a lot better than his domestic policy. I got to tell you, it's bad. In the second term, it's all about Qatar Akbar. It's all about weird things. So anyway, one of the shockingly transformational policies that we saw over and beyond Biden even is this realignment with Qatar and Turkey, not just in general, but in Syria, going all in supporting the Al-Qaeda leader in Syria. Okay? That everything revolves around Jelani. And basically, we are willing to throw the Kurds to the wolves and downright do favors for Jelani, bring him to the White House, full diplomatic backing, basically green light him to slaughter the Kurds, slaughter the Christians, slaughter the Druze, hamstring Israel from protecting them for free. We don't even have to do anything. And it's truly been shocking. Now, I know everyone is praising Marco Rubio, that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But Marco Rubio, just like J.D. Vance, constantly has evolved throughout his career. He changes his spots to the environment that he needs to be in. I don't think in any other lifetime he would have said this, but, he understands that who he works for, and I get it. Ultimately, the buck stops with the man. So, This is a clip of him at a press conference in Europe talking about his support for the Syrian al-Qaeda leader.
Let me say that no one here has ever disputed that the challenge of Syria was going to be a very significant one. A very significant one. Okay, we are dealing with elements that, as we've said in the past, we have, concerns about things that they have done in the past. But the bottom line was we had two choices in Syria. Choice number one was to let the place fall apart into 18 different pieces, long-term civil war, instability, mass migration, playground for terrorists, ISIS running all over the place, Iran getting back in. That was choice number one. Choice number two is to try to see if it was possible to work with these interim authorities and with al-Shara and with his team. Guess what? We chose number two.
So, folks, this is quintessentially the Bush, Obama, Biden foreign policy. Everyone's like, we're done with the neocons. Well, to the extent neocons exist, you just heard exactly what that is. This notion that we have to dive head first and support one bad actor over the supposed illusion of preventing another bad actor, expend our time, treasure, and talent, rather than pulling out completely from there. Oh, we have no choice but to support the al-Qaeda guy affirmatively, even as he's killing Christians and Kurds, because there's other bad guys that he actually is supporting anyway. And it's not just a matter of what he did in the past, it's what he's doing now. Notice he calls him al-Shara. That's also a dead giveaway. He should be called Jelani, and they don't like that. They get very insulted by that. But this whole thing is we have no other choice, but Syria is going to break apart. Syria was a fake construct, like a lot of these countries. When the British Empire fell after World War I, they never should have been drawn that way. Of course it should fall apart. Now, you could say maybe we shouldn't expend political capital trying to redraw it, but just stay out of it. But the notion that we should prevent factions that can't live together from separating is absurd. That is absurd. We had no other option. Okay. Can I ask you this question? Who is affected more by Syria, us or Israel? Well, obviously Israel shares a border. Do you know what Israel did? Did they go in there and try to support the regime? And no, they did strike and maneuver. They created a buffer zone and they destroyed all the weapons from Assad so that Jelani wouldn't get them. And then whenever something is in their interest, they zap it. They don't own it. But yet we have troops flung out precariously in the middle of the country, not in a buffer zone like Israel does. And then we're preventing them from doing something more effectively so we could go headfirst in there and be ineffective. We shouldn't be there. That is a false choice. That very choice that we always have to get involved in Islamic civil wars and choose a side as the lesser of two evils is exactly the garbage that we've been entreated to by the neocons. And it's funny, all the people that say, oh, they hate the neocons, but really it's just, code word for hating Israel, when ironically, Israel is actually much more effective in what they're doing. We're the ones drawing ourselves into these conflicts we shouldn't be into. It's utterly pathetic, that way of thinking. I thought we were done with that way of thinking, but here we are. Make Condoleezza Rice great again. I mean, even she wasn't that bad. Just utterly pathetic. And by the way, related to this was a little bit old. This is last week. The Trump administration, Trump announced that he opposes all Israeli annexation of Judea and Samaria. So now we're being the bitch of the Arabs. He opposes any Israeli annexation. Quote, we have enough things to think about now. We don't need to be dealing with the West Bank. I'm thinking, what do you mean you have enough things to be? Who says that's your decision? You're the one worrying about it. And then you're worried about building up Gaza. You're worried about building up Jelani. See, the equivalent would be if we said we need Americans to help Israel annex Judea and Samaria. That would be the equivalent. But no, they would do that on their own. You're getting in their way. So we're going to affirmatively help the terrorists in Gaza and Syria as a Wilsonian intervention, but then we'll be like, oh, we can't be on the hook for Judea. You're not. And by the way, remember, this ties into this ties into the story from last week or 2 weeks ago that Netanyahu was broaching the idea with Trump to wean off of military aid, which is what everyone says they want. And he says no. I'll tell you why he said no, because he wants that endless control. He is the ultimate Wilsonian. It's just on behalf of his Arab interests. Let me give you a third case of this to move on. Last week, Vice President Vance's Twitter account, his X account, he posted something referring to the Turkish massacre of Armenians as a genocide. Okay, so that's a big point of contention. I think you and I, all of us, agree that we know exactly what the Ottoman Turks did, what the Muslims did. And JD rightfully tweets that out. And then it was deleted. It was summarily deleted. So clearly the Turks control, and Erdogan, just like the Qataris, control this administration, and they laid down the law with him and his staff, and he deleted that. But he shouldn't have deleted that. He was right about that. But notice how everything is Erdogan and Qatar Akbar. And that's something that dramatically needs to change. There's no question about that. And by the way, so what are we focused on? We're focused on hamstringing Israel, building up Gaza, kissing up to the Turks, building up Jelani in Syria. Then we have this whole escapade in Venezuela where we expended so much capital on, it's not clear what we're doing. Let me tell you what we're not expending capital on. I just saw this over the weekend. Some of you did. I can't believe I missed it, but it's just being, reported publicly on December 29th. So this is, we're talking about 7 weeks ago, 2 U.S. pilots were flying on a private jet, one of these private charter companies, not one of the big airlines, from Suriname to Dubai. And they landed in Guinea's Conakry airport, their capital, and they had full clearance. We have the records to prove it, for a fuel stop, and they got clearance. They were carrying a Brazilian family. Guinea's military arrested them, seized the plane, which is the expensive plane, even after 3 of their own civilian judges, including an appeals court, ruled in their favor and ordered bail. They're being held. Can you imagine 2 Americans being held in a Guinea prison? You can imagine the gangs, it's like a dungeon. There's no water, electricity. And I know they've publicly appealed to Rubio and Trump. I don't know. I don't want to speculate what's going on, not going on. All I know is this. This happened December 29th, and it's February 16th, and they're still in the dungeon. I don't understand when we had the ability to do what we did in Venezuela and literally physically remove their long-standing dictator. With spectacular success, by the way, whatever the motivation was. And somehow this could drag on and we have no ability. What's that 1975 movie where Marines march into the Pasha's castle and just to grab him? How does that happen? I don't understand it. But here's what I do know. There are priorities, and there are priorities when it comes to this administration. What's happening to these 2 pilots is emblematic of sort of the forgotten man economically. Whereas the Syria, Qatar, Gaza, Turkey stuff, and Venezuela evidently as well, that's sort of the data centers, the crypto, if you get the analogy of where I'm coming from. It's not ideological. It's not personal. It's all transactional. And that's what this administration prioritized. I'm sorry to say it. I know it offends people. I know, Mr. Trump, you can't say anything. But in any other context, just understand any criticism I have of this administration, just know that you and I both know all my colleagues would be screaming bloody murder about all these things I mentioned today and every day if a Democrat would be doing it, and maybe even if a different type of Republican would be doing it. So the fact that he's our guy, supposedly, and he represents us more than anyone else, does that make it less alarming that he's falling down on the job or more? Well, obviously it's more. It's more because it reflects on us more. It's more of a problem because he makes it that we have no agency to fight it. So I don't even understand what we're doing foreign policy wise. This is a big, big problem. And again, just going back to immigration, in case some of you think, I know a lot of people were saying, oh, what was it? This agreement with Homan, that Operation Metrosexual or something, where, okay, we'll pull out federal agents if you agree to clamp down. And they had this photo op of one riot, the local police fighting. Well, Alpha News, which is the best conservative news, Liz Collin, we've had her on the show before. She reports at Alpha News that the Minnesota State Patrol quietly limited the ability of its troopers to contact ICE during traffic stops involving suspected illegal aliens. The Minnesota State Police, they have 600 troopers, and they make more than 300,000 traffic stops per year. Multiple state troopers spoke with Alpha News on condition of anonymity, explained that the new directive came down sometime in the summer of 2024, and that's still in place. So I don't understand what's happening there. Don't tell me mission accomplished. We all know that nothing has changed. We all know that. I don't like being gaslit. So anyway, folks, what are we left with? What are we left with? So then we're left with, okay, well, Democrats are going to come in, sweep the federal positions, and Republicans already don't have enough power, so nothing's being done. Trump himself, by the way, said last week he's done everything he wants to do, nothing more to do. Okay, so how are we going to solve immigration? So then we say at a state level, but then we agree with judicial supremacism, so they say the states can't do it, and no other state aside from Florida is even trying street-level enforcement. So you have in Florida that all driver's license examinations are now being done in English. You cannot have an interpreter. They've implemented that. It's the only state doing that. So they're leading on that. You have James Othmeyer, the attorney general. He subpoenaed Donna Deegan, who is the Jacksonville mayor, saying that the city may have impeded immigration enforcement. So the feds aren't even hitting them with 1324, but Florida is trying to do it for them. And by the way, they say, oh, we don't have enough people at DOJ and we can't do it. We don't have enough resources. That's a whole nother can of worms. DOJ is malignant. It's just as bad as under Biden. By the way, just so you know, the Trump DOJ, I want you to understand this, they are persecuting people like you and me that are working there, that are trying to work on things like this. Like, you're not allowed to work on January 6th there. It's a complete moratorium. You'd be shocked how bad it is. I will just tell you, it's really, really bad. And you could yell about Pam Bondi all you want, but didn't a certain president, on this President's Day, don't we celebrate, we shouldn't celebrate that, but because it's George Washington's Day, but the majestic power of the presidency, the buck stops, but somehow it's everyone else's fault. But anyway, we should have every state create their own 1324 equivalents of any local official that shields and harbors. Oh, Daniel, we don't have the votes for sanctuary laws. Yeah, but states do. States have the votes. 20 states do. 21 or 22, really. But no, because we have a generation of loser Republicans, because for 5 consecutive electoral cycles, Trump has refilled the swamp. And every single time we even get close to having a viable recruit, that's precisely when they call in the airstrike desperately and they panic and they get Trump to support who they want. And that's why we don't have red states that are doing what Florida does, and we might lose Florida on the next election to a rhino. So anyway, I'm bringing up Florida because even in Florida now, the same rhino dirtbags in the House run by Speaker Perez, they're trying to cut off funding for Alligator Alcatraz and state immigration enforcement. They don't want it. The same people that tried to block the bill last year, this time of year, it was about, I think it was February. They're at it again. You have this guy, Alex Andrade, who's a lawyer, but he's also a subcommittee chairman of a health committee. His law firm is now working to represent the state in a lawsuit against to represent Planned Parenthood against the state in a lawsuit about defunding Planned Parenthood. And he's the Republican chairman of a health subcommittee. This is unreal. So he's the guy that went after them on Hope, Florida, which is the only successful blueprint we have to reducing the welfare state. You know, they didn't like that. They used state funding, you know, and like lawsuit settlements to fight the marijuana stuff. It's like, folks, every state uses state funding for public service announcements for health. The left ensconces their views as public health. So they'll use, you know, money that was meant to be public funding for public service announcements on global warming and things like that. So shouldn't we in a red state not be bashful about using it for what we know is truly a public health problem? And he fought the weed stuff. But this is what the Republicans fought him, because the Republicans support weed. They support Planned Parenthood. They support illegal immigration, even in Florida. Now, can I ask you a question? After DeSantis' dominant performance over 7 years, how is it that the Republicans there don't fear him and they're able to do all this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a certain man that moved down there, and to quote George Washington, we put all of our security and repose into that one man. So, well, he became the big cheese. This is what happens when you worship one man. George Washington didn't want himself to be worshipped. And that's why he started that precedent of devolving power that he could have had, that King George was shocked, couldn't imagine what this man did. By the way, it's hilarious. He set the precedent that a president, executive authority, the most powerful office in America, shouldn't be longer than 8 years. And yet we are told that a district judge could serve for life, which, by the way, is no problem. That's in the Constitution. He should serve for life. But because a district judge rules on a settlement between, I don't know, Intel and Apple and Microsoft, that's the job of a judge, not to rule over the other branches in every public policy issue. But to say that they do and they stand for life, again, that's a degree of power that George Washington could have never fathomed. Frankly, King George couldn't have fathomed because he didn't have that. He did have parliament. And yet, because we have a decrepit, broken Republican Party, they have agreed to judicial supremacism. They're like, we'll get our judges in and play the game, rather than militating against the premise of it. I know I brought up a lot of different issues today. I'm just like kind of just free for all today. But please subscribe and like Hurwitz Show. It's completely, every video I put out on data centers is now zapped. It gets 0 views. So definitely make sure to subscribe. Also, we have our Substack. I'm going to put out another post tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow morning. So subscribe. Daniel Hurwitz, Liberating Truths. Put into a search engine, either one, Daniel Hurwitz, Substack, and you'll get the subscribe. You'll get the email. I'm doing it once or twice a week now. I'll try to keep this up when I have time. One other thing, just before I close, I'm going to put up on the screen here for those of you who are watching a Give, Send, Go page for Shay Anger. She's the wife of Rudy Anger, our Texas activist leader. It's ripping me apart. It's really weighing on me. We were just working on some projects together, and out of nowhere, they were celebrating their 25th anniversary. She gets a diagnosis of glioblastoma. And you all know what that means. And we're just trying to scrape the literature of any doctor, any idea. So all this is very, very expensive to do this on the fly. Obviously, insurance doesn't cover a lot of this stuff. So this is not just, sometimes you have the thing like you feel bad for someone, but it's not a monetary issue. This actually is a monetary issue. We got to keep her alive at all costs. I'm just heartbroken. It's one of our best listeners. If you're looking for charity, you cannot find a better cause. Because this will also be in itself a little bit of a study that we're going to study together. What works, obviously you can't do a full study with a number of one, a sample size of one, but any of these treatments, alternatives, along with traditional, all costs, we're going to fight this with God's help. So we wish Shay Anger a speedy recovery, and Rudy and the entire family, their daughter Allie, young people, peak of life in their 50s. There's too much of this happening. We all know people in our lives like that. I know way too many people. This is really hitting me very hard. So please, Shea, SHEA, anger, ANGER, give, send, go. Just put that into a search engine and please donate generously. Till tomorrow, God bless you all, and thank you for listening.